Hello and welcome to Presenting, a podcast where we chat about various topics related to role-playing games, typically Paizo products such as Pathfinder and Starfinder, but also others. I'm John Godek, and with me today is Dusty Hill. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great having you as well. Dusty is a queer Latin tabletop RPG producer, performer, and designer, striving to tell stories that uplift BIPOC and queer voices. Dusty is co-producer and player in Goblets and Gaze, a Pathfinder 2nd Edition podcast. Dusty is also showrunner and co-producer for An Unwavering Force, a Star Wars podcast using Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And Dusty is also player in Bring Your Own Mech, a Lancer actual play podcast. Dusty is also working on a game inspired by John Wick and Assassins in general, which I hope you talk a little bit more about because I'm really interested in that. Mm-hmm. You can find Dusty at Dust E Hill on Twitter. So, Dusty, can you talk some about how you got started playing tabletop RPGs and in particular got into podcasting? Because that's not something everybody makes that jump into.
Yeah. So I actually didn't get into tabletop games, tabletop RPGs until I was about 20, when a friend of mine invited me to a separate friend's table because they're going to start a new campaign in actually Pathfinder, first edition for Rise of the Rune Lords. Mm-hmm. And like I've always been into like board games and trading card games and video games, and so like tabletop games is one thing I just didn't get into, just because I didn't have anyone to play with, and so never thought about it. So we started with that. It took a bit. Paizo 1E, Pathfinder 1E specifically, little crunchy. Even like to this day for me, I love 2nd edition with my whole heart, because I think it's like the design is so much more simplified and straightforward for how my brain interprets it.
Right.
But yeah, so it started with that, and my first podcast wasn't specifically a tabletop podcast. It was just along with all my other things, I'm super into Pokemon. And so it was a solo Pokemon podcast because my friend, who also invited me to the table, started their own podcast and told me about Anchor. And for me, it's like, oh, I could just upload this to like the website or my phone and do it myself. And so I did that for a while, and then come the pandemic, where everyone was playing games online, I started listening to actually Goblets and Gaze, because I started Goblets and Gaze as a fan because my friend was in it. And I already like love playing these games. Like we've pre-pandemic, we played an in-year campaign of Reign of Winter 3 years through and did such a killer campaign. And I was super into it. And it's like, well, I mean, if you wanted to guest or anytime. And so I guested on there once, and then I started in other productions on my own. And now I'm here with too many projects.
Yes. I hear you on that. So speaking of which, now you're co-producing 2 and playing in 3 podcasts now. Can you talk about each of them and what they're about and kind of the distinctions between them?
Yeah. So the one I've been doing the longest is, well, I guess Goblets and Gaze, because I started again as a fan, then a player, a guest, and a player. Goblets and Gaze is a Pathfinder 2e. It's a homebrew setting made by our GM Aubrey, as well as some of the original players like Aquino and Sparlock and Ferris, who are in there. And we're in our 4th season, and it's a totally like homebrew campaign where we're taking stuff here and there, and it's about it's called Blood of Kings, specifically this campaign, and it's dealing with people in this world first having to go on an adventure to find a missing prince, and then everything kind of spiraling from there as they uncover more and more of something happening on the back end of this world. And now we're in the 4th season, 4th and final season, as we I really can't say much about season 4 because anything
no spoilers
would be an incredible spoiler.
Yeah.
But it's super fun. We are getting like into the very like nitty gritty of stuff. We did archetype rules.
Mhm.
And come season 4, we are doing dual classing, which is just so fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
unbelievably fun.
I have a question for you with Goblets and Gays.
Yeah.
What makes a gay podcast or Pathfinder game any different from any others? Because everything you just said just sounds like any other actual play. So there's got to be something a little different. Is it just the players, or is it kind of how the setting is set up, or is it just it's more welcoming? I'm just, kind of how's that fitting?
Yeah. So I mean the whole table is all queer players. We're all like
Right.
different gender identities, sexual identities, all that stuff. And the stuff that I didn't really mention is that there is just so much interpersonal drama as well as like romance plots going on and
Okay.
like other stuff. It really, I think Goblets and Gays really encapsulates the difference between playing at a non-queer RPG table and a completely
Hmm.
queer RPG table, because
Hmm.
in experience with both, it's very different games under the same house.
Okay. Cool. No, great, great. And what about an Unwavering Force, which I interviewed Navarre a couple weeks ago about,
Mhm.
and it sounds really cool from the description of it.
Unwavering Force is my current passion project and something I'm super proud of, just with everything that's gone into it with the group and everything. I'm sure Navarre spoke about his character, who I adore. It started mainly as I think Navarre probably mentioned it a while ago. He tweeted, "Hey, I want to play a game as Padawans running from Order 66." And I was recently on. I was doing a Clone Wars watch for the first time because I've never seen the show. And just really getting into Star Wars truly for the first
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
because I grew up in like episode 1 came out when I was a kid, like the prequels, and so I grew
Yeah.
up with Star Wars, but wasn't into Star Wars until recently, and that's due to a podcast called The More Civilized Age with Austin Walker and some other group from people, Waypoint, who um it was a gaming podcast from Vice until recently. That's a whole other thing, not going to get into. It really showed me that the Star Wars itself could be way more than just the epic space opera fantasy, which there's nothing wrong with. We all love
Hmm.
like high epic and stuff, but really the political story going on and the stories of people just fighting against an overwhelming force and not giving up, like the whole concept of hope, but going like deeper into that. And so that's where the idea for the podcast started. And we went back and forth on what system to use, because of course there's a Star Wars system, but I personally, I and a couple of us in the group, because a couple of us are from Goblets and Gays as well, we all love Pathfinder 2e. And so we kind of had a chat about it, and it's like, well, if you're going to be force users in this, because that's the biggest thing, everyone is a force user of a different kind, we want a system that makes you feel powerful, and Pathfinder 2e is excellent at doing that. So we went with that, and it's been just a joy to play, a joy to build characters, and a joy to just like tell this story about how different people who interact with this one unifying thing, the force, throughout the whole galaxy, all having to fight something that is trying to squash it out. It's a very fun story. We recorded an episode this week. That's not going to be out for a couple months, but it was my favorite session to date. Which the previous session was my favorite session to date. So it just keeps getting better. I'm so excited for people to hear it.
Very cool. Very cool. With everybody being force users and using second edition rules,
Mm-hmm.
what class or archetype or how do you fit that in? What can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So it the idea for that actually came from Dark Archives and the Psychic, because the
Okay.
Psychic stuff, a lot of it really screams like Jedi, specifically
Hmm.
Jedi. And so We have two players playing like the regular Jedi, and so they have they're doing dual classing because again I want them to feel powerful, and so one is a ranger psychic, the other is a cleric psychic. And we're basically using like the push and pull and all the manipulate actions you could do with like telekinesis and all that, and the psychic rules as the force stuff. And then one of our players, they're playing basically a Night Sister or a Dathomirian witch, which is a person that uses the Force in a completely different way than anyone else. And I believe they are doing a Magus wizard,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
unbelievably powerful.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, especially with like the spell strike and all that. And
yeah.
because a lot of the Night Sister and the way that they interact with the Force and that is kind of like these rituals and spells. It works out for both the wizard, like getting into the mindset of that, and the magus for being as deadly because they're also like basically a bodyguard, I'd say with air quotes, but really like a bounty hunter for the rich and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how they start the series. You'll find out more if you just listen to episode 1, honestly. And then we have someone that is Chiss, who are uh, alien species that like live on the outer edge of like the galaxy as well, and they interact with the force by just using it like as intuition, like a lot of like almost like divination stuff. And so their
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, they are an oracle, oracle rogue, I believe. And they use like a lot of again like divination, looking into like quote unquote the future or all that stuff. And then our last player is a trash man. And that's not derogatory. They are literally playing a trash man in Star Wars. And theirs is a little different because they kind of wanted to play like an average person, but there's still like
Mm-hmm.
something there. And so they're actually just the most straightforward. They are a summoner fighter. Yeah, summoner fighter with the gunslinger archetype. And so they have like all that. They have like a pet dog that's like interacting with like all that force magic in their own way. So it
Mm-hmm.
really, like, some of it was obvious, some of it we had to like kind of go into the classes and see how the mechanics work and the flavor
Right.
works, until we came up with these, I think, truly classes that really worked.
No, that sounds awesome. It sounds like it was a lot of legwork even before you started recording, just to figure out how the system would work. Did you start at first level then, or did you start at higher level?
We started at third level
Yeah.
for these players,
Okay.
which, being a dual class, you're already unbelievably strong as is. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really like how I wanted them to feel, at least in the beginning of this series.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And then finally, Bring Your Own Mech.
Yeah, Bring Your Own Mech is a Lancer podcast. Our GM is Reed. We are currently on like a hiatus just due to health issues, but we're into our second season. We have other stuff coming down the pipeline of like different like mini stories we're playing, but it's a story heavily inspired by the stuff like Cowboy Bebop, um,
Mm-hmm.
where we're playing mercs who use mechanized chassis are mechs. So like Lancer is like a mecha RPG.
Right.
And that one is real fun because we get to play people, you may see a theme here, who are kind of down on their luck and are just constantly trying to survive in a world that's trying to squash them for any other reason. For Lancer, it's corporations, it's all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a show that I'm as even as a player, I'm super proud of. Our editor and producer Amelia does all the music for the show, and
Wow.
there's like custom music made by her all throughout, and I just listen to that stuff just on the daily because it's like really good tracks. And
So much work though.
it's a lot of work. Like, I've seen their like Reaper like screenshot, and they have like
Yeah.
13 tracks open, and I'm like, whew, that's a lot even for me.
Yeah. No, I think I use 10 tracks on mine. So
Yeah.
wow. Speaking of Reaper, now I know what DAW you use for editing. Can you talk a little bit about your production process? So I produce several podcasts myself, recording, and I do video and whatnot. So I'm always curious to hear what other folks do, kind of the equipment you use, the software, the timing for scheduling, or whatever.
Mhm. So the biggest thing, the one that I do the most in-depth editing is going to be Unwavering Force, because that's the one that I mainly show run. I do some editing stuff for Goblins Gaze, for like special episodes, but it's mainly like Aubrey's thing. As far as what we do, we use a combination of Zoom, and Zencaster actually.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
Zoom, I use Zoom so we could do both. We could see each other. I think that's better for like role playing. Personally, just like so we could see visual cues from each other and play off of that. And also, I share like music art tracks during the episode, because I have a thing where I reach out to people on my own and have them record snippets of stuff for NPCs and other stuff in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so Zoom is the easiest way for me to insert that without having to like, hey, everyone, on the count of 3, you're going to hit this and play it at the same time.
Right. You can just share it to everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it.
And we use Zencaster for audio because Navar is the audiophile of our group, and he believes Zencaster has the best audio fidelity, which I believe it does, and it gets everything super clean. I like having the both. I Goblets and Gaze, we use Craig and Giark, which I'm.
Have you had Craig fail on you?
Oh yeah, that's why we use Giark, which
Yeah.
Giark is like another a plugin, I think made by the same person, that is the backup for it.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So you can use Craig and Giark at the same time.
Yeah,
And record through Discord.
yeah, exactly. And that's what we do for that, just because
Wow.
that's the easiest for that group.
Yeah.
It's actually, Jark is pretty reliable. Craig isn't, not at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah. Zencaster, I've recorded over 320 episodes with Zencaster.
mhm.
And I had a problem with one guy's audio because he didn't have very good internet connection.
Mhm.
So he would drop off. And so we had to basically, he comes to my house to record now. He uses my internet on my laptop and plays his character. That's how we finally worked that out. But then for Zencaster, I've had a couple times where it'll, like when I'm recording video, it'll swap over to OBS, the OBS camera. And so I'll lose video.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know why it does that. And I fooled with some settings. It hasn't done it since. But otherwise, Zencaster has been pretty bulletproof. I liked it during the pandemic where you got it all free, though.
Yeah.
And now I'm paying for it because I got hooked after 2 years of pandemic.
Yeah.
So.
Early pandemic, one of my early projects was called Shouting in Place, where it was like an interview podcast where I would do one-on-one, and Zencaster was a lifesaver because I was specifically reached out to people who like didn't really like do a lot of podcast stuff. And for that, the easiest settings, like, hey, we're just going to click this link. I'll do everything on my end. You don't have to worry about downloading or anything or any of that stuff, which is great. But like really, there's like, if you're recording with people online, there's no 100% foolproof way, I feel. You just got to find what works with your group.
And so Reaper you use for editing?
So for editing, we do actually a 2 process. So Navar actually goes in and does the initial cleaning of like cutting out the silences, the extra uhs, the ahs, and
too much work.
And like just cleaning up background audio, which is a lot of work, which is why they do that part. And then I take it in and I add, because we have music, I do sound effects, I add in all this other stuff.
Oh, wow.
I record extra bits sometimes. Honestly, and this is gonna like get me in trouble, a lot of people, I still use Audacity.
No, a lot of people use Audacity. I think it works good.
It works. Honestly, I've been so used to it. It's hard for me to switch over because I know Reaper apparently has like better like features for it and like a cleaner setup, but I've been using Audacity, and I understand that sometimes editing and having to have 2 separate Audacity windows open is not exactly the most proficient way to do it, but it's how I've been able to do it. And that's like Audacity has like modulation you could do. I could edit in, I could put the sound in, crossfade the clips. Like
Well, you can do all that in Reaper, by the way. So
yeah, I know. It's just like once you get all the tools down, it's
yeah.
yeah.
No, when I had made to make the decision to do podcasting editing, I looked, everybody was using Audacity, and I thought, okay, well, what else can I use? And there's this Reaper thing, which was like this semi-pro next step up. And I said, I'm just going to bite the bullet and learn Reaper. And it took a while. Initially, it was just very basic stuff. Now I learned how to use all the plugins and things, so it's easier. And I could go through and clean out all the dead spots and all the ums and ahs. And I did that manually for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it automatically. I just don't trust it. So I just look, if there's big silences, I edit them out. But if it's just, a couple of ticks, I don't worry about it because it just sounds very natural then.
Yeah, yeah. I think the vibe we're going for with Unwavering Force is actual play meets audio drama.
So it's a little bit more performy than
yeah. And for actually all that stuff, Navarre uses Descript, which is a program that you don't have to pay for. It does the transcript, but also like he finds all the uhs and goes through that.
I have Descript and I'm paying for it for another. I'm actually transcribing all my interviews for something else, and I see it does that. It'll remove all those from the transcript. I guess it'll do it from the audio. I it's just a new tool, and I said, I'm afraid to mess with it yet. So I see the Samsung mic you have here now. What gear do all your players have? Or is it they pick their own, or do you?
It's kind of like all over. So everyone has like their own setup. My partner actually is part of the show. They actually have that set up right behind me.
I see that with the ring camera. And
the ring camera. I think it's a Razer. I think they use a Wave 3 Elgato mic, which is also a very good mic. I use a Samsung Q2U, which is a USB one, but has like really clean fidelity. And it's also like very inexpensive. I think it's like $70.
Oh man, I found one with a boom arm for one of my folks I do a show with. $20 on Facebook Marketplace. I said, so I keep, anytime I see a deal like that, I just buy it because it's like, it's such a crazy good deal.
Yeah,
because I've tried a lot of mics. This is an MV7. It's my backup because I'm at my weekend place. I actually got a SM7B really cheap during the pandemic, and I just love that now. It's my main mic. But the Samsung, I gave that to Jason Keeley. I do recording with. I gave it to him, and it just sounds so good. It's hard to make it sound bad.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly clean. I've had very little fuss with it. Previous, like the early parts of the Unwavering Force and like other shows, I was using an Elgato Wave 3 as well. Which that one, it's really good. It has some hiccups sometimes. Just like in the interface, I've had to like mid-recording stop and then use my backup, which is a Yeti, which I had for like the early years. And the Yeti, I learned my lesson. It's good if you have a soundproof studio,
right?
And like for beginners, of course, it's good. Like if you just want to record something, but like it was.
But for how much you pay for that, I mean, it's actually twice as much as the Samsung.
It truly was. I got it on sale, and it was still more expensive than this. And then it's kind of like across the board. I believe one of our players, Lonzo, also has like an Elgato mic. Navarre also uses the Samsung. They're the one that turned me on to this. Aquino, they have. I'm unsure. I think it's like a low. I say low, not like in a like the meaning way, but like a Rode mic. It's like one of the cheaper ones.
Right.
And Theta, who's one of the other players, I think they just use like headphone mics is what they have. And that's because like they're a student, they're doing all this. They've actually recently had to like step away from the show. Just like school stuff, and like of course it's more important than doing a Star Wars show with your friends. But
Navarre mentioned about getting new mics for players and stuff, and my actual play, we actually started in person, recorded a bunch, so I have a lot of mics that are all XLR mics that plug into a
Mm-hmm.
mixing board and that we would use. But now that we're all remote, basically I buy people nice gaming headsets and that's what they use. Yeah.
It
You know,
works.
good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah. And sometimes that's all you need. It just needs to work.
Yeah. How often do you guys record? You mentioned you have some stuff in the bank,
Mm-hmm.
right? For Unwavering Force. So what's your kind of scheduling for that?
We usually do bi-weekly Thursday
Yeah.
nights for us. And that's very flexible simply because when we started this, knowing the amount of work that we were putting into this, I wanted as much buffer as possible.
Right.
So I
Right.
think currently we're like 5 episodes ahead in recording.
Oh, that's
And we
great.
also release
Yeah.
bi-weekly. Um,
Yeah.
so having all that saved, and sometimes we cut up recordings in two, so it's even more episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we have a Google like calendar invite that I send out,
Yeah.
and just like we have a work server that we have a
Hmm.
scheduling tab and all that stuff in there.
Yeah. Well, that sounds more official than we have bi-weekly, but everybody knows when it is. We thought initially we would record 3 episodes a night, but we can't. We record 2 episodes, but we very intentionally make them 2. So we have a start, a finish,
Mm-hmm.
take a break, start and a finish. And for our actual play, so we posted episode 112 last week, and I have 20 more episodes all banked. We've actually finished doing the thing, but I have 10 more months of episodes banked, and then
Oh, that's so
we got to
nice.
figure out we're going to do something else.
The-
So when I'm editing, because I don't edit until right before I post,
yeah,
I'm like, this is almost a year ago. I don't remember what was going on.
yeah,
But it's kind of fun then reliving, oh yeah, this is neat and kind of everything.
yeah. We actually started doing that with Goblets and Gays, because Aubrey, all of like season 3 and prior to that, we were like the long format podcasting, so we
Right.
had like 3-hour episodes, 2-hour episodes, big fights for like 4+ hours.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a long
it's
episode.
and it's also like a long edit for Aubrey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
So when season 4 started, we like came up with this, and I really enjoy the format. Um, so we cut it in two. We had 2 episodes banked each night, and like for Unwavering Force, I just tried to keep it like very like a quick, not a quick, but like a compact session. I
Right.
usually keep it at max like 2.5 hours,
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
because I feel personally I'm very good at setting pacing and setting stuff. I do so many cliffhangers, um, and also just like
Yes.
so much like cutting in between players and groups. Like if a group is split, I love cutting just at a very dramatic moment, because then
Hmm.
it keeps the tension going even with the other group, and the players are just sitting there like, all right, you had something wild happen, now you have time to process that, let's go to someone else.
Very good. All right. So shifting gears a little
Hmm.
bit. So, many of the large tabletop RPG companies have been working on diversifying both their offerings, so kind of what they have in their writing and their style and stuff, and their staffs. How do you view their progress so far, and maybe progress in the community overall in kind of accepting or demanding those sorts of changes?
um it's kind of like all over the place. Like some, honestly, I think Paizo is doing just fantastic, incredible work. I'm biased, both like I love the system, but also like I have friends that are doing work for Paizo as well. Like starting the union for the workers, and then also just everything kind of like Impossible Lands. Um, the Book of the Dead I adore, because I just see so many just like Southern America and Mexican influences throughout all that, and that's just, it makes my like my heart happy, and just my brain go wild with all the stuff I could do. uh and it you just all like the actual diversity in both the writers and the content in there coming from Paizo products, I feel has been excellent, great. I can't say that across the board enthusiastically. There's definitely been steps, like especially with 5e and everything that's happened in the past year. there's steps towards it, but that like that takes time to actually see and actually tell that the work is done or is being done actively.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but I mean, as far as like having a push for it, I definitely agree with that. Like, there should be a push for it because all these like tabletop projects coming out and all these shows with the popularity of doing online recording and shows and all that, you would have to make an active effort to not have a diverse cast just naturally, in my opinion. And so that's like seeing all that, I want to push forward because that's why I am so adamant about raising like uh, BIPOC and queer voices because there wasn't a lot of that when I joined the space. I have this whole long over thing that my friends have dubbed the Dustyverse because ever since I started playing Pathfinder 1E, like through the original Rise of the Rune Lords and Reign of Winter and stuff like that, I've been inserting a family of Mexican characters throughout
Hmm.
all these different games and all these different stories and all these different systems. They're all like interconnected because I'm making this family as prevalent as possible in my own stories. And it's now coming more and more to see that, and I love it. I just think that we just can't be complacent with it. um yeah, I could go on for a long time about this, but it's coming in. There's progress. I just wish there was more.
What about acceptance by the community? Because I'm a lot older than you, and there are not a lot of people of color that were playing when I started, and now they're all kind of old people playing, and some of them aren't as keen on the changes. Do you see that something that's shifting, or it's just kind of reflective of what's going on in the world today, or kind of what are your thoughts on that?
uh it's, I wouldn't say it's shifting. I think it's just that the other voices are more prevalent just because we have the pandemic where we were all online. And I mean, we were all online because there was nothing to do. And so those voices are actually being heard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I see that there's more acceptance of it than there isn't. Um, I just, the ones that are not wanting to change, not wanting to just actively try to tell diverse stories and sometimes even telling harmful stories are just the louder minority of this, just because
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing this longer and so their voices are louder compared to like 3, 4, 5 times the audience that are pushing for this. They're just, not being heard as much, but they're still being heard.
Yeah, very good. So, what advice do you have for folks who are interested in getting into podcasting for tabletop RPGs, especially people of color and queer folks?
Honestly, what I feel for, if you want to start like a podcast, I would say you could do like outward casting calls. That's a very common thing. I would just say try to find people that you're comfortable with, that that would want to do this. Never underestimate the work that goes into this. That's one thing I should say. It's not you could just record and hit send, but that's gonna still be a lot of work for what you're doing, organizing stuff, putting stuff together. So get a group that you're comfortable with, because comfort at a table for tabletop games means that you're just going to have a better show. It's just going to be a better thing. Uh, Also, like when you're starting this, consider specifically why you want to tell the story, why you want to release this into a podcast, and not just like have fun with your friends. Because if you come together and realize, oh, I just want to tell a story, maybe just like do a home game. Home games are perfectly fun. They are fantastic. Some of my best like RPG memories are just in a home game with my friends. Uh, and also set expectations within your group. Just like, hey, make sure like safety tools like lines and veils, just like government, like, hey, this is like the story that I'm looking to tell. This is the tone. If that's not great for you, maybe it wouldn't be great for the show. And if you just air all that out and set all these things ahead of time, you won't have like mid season um like concerns with each other are just like, oh, sorry, we can't record, one person just doesn't want to do this, or et cetera, et cetera. It's you're doing this all together with a group. You're basically doing like a really intense group project, and your grading is it's not graded, I guess. If you really want to look into the ratings, you could do that. Sometimes I was like, don't always look at the ratings, don't always look at what people say online. If you are happy with the story that you're telling, I think that's more important than anything.
For sure. For sure. So what's next for Dusty? What's this cool John Wick kind of thing you're working on? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I've been working on the game. It's been in the process for like maybe 4 or 5 months. I think basically since I've seen John Wick 4. Because I have like a small like couple games on itch right now is where I publish all my stuff. And I really wanted to do a game that is set like in a similar vein to John Wick, because all the houses and how the whole like world of assassins is set up is so fascinating to me. So I kind of went into that and kind of it's so heavily John Wick inspired, but it's like its own thing. There's different it's it's called Built by the Architects. And architects
Mhm.
are what the assassins are called, and they're part of like this whole bigger thing. The architects have people above them called pillars. The pillars are all part of like a pantheon, which is what like they're called. And I wanted to mimic the intense like action and stress of fights in John Wick in gameplay. So it's actually all going to be card based. Like you're using a deck of cards for everything. Um, and the way you play is similar to a TCG, where if you get into actions, you have these cards, you play them, um, and it's supposed to be like quick pace back and forth in between you just narratively playing your character.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
it's I'm super excited and proud of it. Like I have, it's basically it's written. I just need to format it, which is like a whole other thing. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
but that should be out soon. My plan is to have it out before Big Bad Con, basically, which is end of September.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Dusty, it's been great getting a chance to meet you. It's been very informative for me. It's always a pleasure to talk to somebody who's doing actual plays and see kind of what I can learn from them and what's going on. So thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Again, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.